19 black celebrities who had the most disturbing death scene photos. You might believe that becoming an icon under the dazzling stage lights guarantees a lifetime of bliss. But what happens when the forgiving spotlight fades, leaving a powerhouse alone with their invisible enemy? Behind the picture-perfect facades of these 19 legendary black musicians lies a velvet curtain soaked in raw agony and fame's crushing pressure. From the cold confines of prison cells to the sudden drop into absolute destitution, we are about to expose the earth-shattering secrets and invisible punishment that the music industry desperately tried to bury. Brace yourself for the tragic truth. Florence Ballard. The Motown machine was never designed to protect its most brilliant pawns. It was a ruthless factory built to extract their magic and discard the remains. Florence Ballard, the foundational powerhouse who birthed the Supremes, was a vocal titan who harbored a dream of pulling young black women out of dilapidated slums. Basking under the dazzling stage lights, her roaring, fiercely powerful notes created a golden illusion of invincibility. Yet, in the eyes of commercial calculation, her monumental talent was merely a disposable commodity. When the label decided that a different, more mainstream aesthetic was required to conquer the charts, Florence faced her sudden drop. The architect of the group was unceremoniously shoved into the background shadows, experiencing a scandalous betrayal that shattered her soul. Cast out into a cold Las Vegas night in 1967, she was coerced into signing away her own name and hard-earned royalties. The majestic superstar was instantly reduced to a shattered woman, thrown to the wolves as mere tabloid fodder. Her descent was a portrait of raw agony. The deafening cheers of thousands were replaced by the terrifying silence of an unfillable void within the four walls of poverty. Wasting away from prolonged depression, this frail mother was forced to stand in welfare lines just to feed her children, fighting a merciless foe while the world looked away. The systemic blade of industry exploitation and fame's crushing pressure ultimately delivered her death sentence. She passed away at the devastatingly young age of 32 from a fatal heart attack, dying in absolute destitution. Her tragedy stands as a chilling warning. In the kingdom of Hollywood, a halo is often just a beautifully disguised guillotine. And as one shattered heart finally ceased its painful beating on American soil, another titanic spirit was actively suffocating under the exact same industry machinery across the Atlantic, desperately trying to numb the noise in a fog-drenched European hotel room. Jimi Hendrix. In the dimly lit corner of a London hotel room, a Fender Stratocaster leaned silently against the wall, its strings still carrying the faint, electrical charge of a powerhouse. This instrument had been his ultimate weapon. Together they had built a golden illusion of absolute freedom, setting stages ablaze while masking the invisible punishment of his reality. But on the night of September 17, 1970, the guitar could only watch in mute horror as its exhausted master, just 27 years old, was entirely consumed by an invisible enemy. Chronic insomnia and the crushing weight of exploitative lawsuits had turned his existence into a relentless pursuit of rest. Seeking refuge from the dazzling stage lights, Jimi swallowed a handful of heavy sleeping pills. It was a desperate bid to quiet the noise in his head, but it instantly triggered a sudden drop into a bottomless abyss. The wooden witness stood helpless as his breathing slowed to a definitive stop, forced to observe the raw agony of a tragic asphyxiation. The magical hands that once commanded tens of thousands of cheering fans now lay paralyzed, defeated by a merciless foe born directly from fame's crushing pressure. The strings would never vibrate under his touch again, left only to echo the eternal silence of a genius who tragically traded his life for a fleeting moment of transcendence. As the electric hum of a tortured rock god faded into a permanent, stifling quiet, a different kind of suffocating silence was already claiming a royal figure who possessed a razor-sharp voice capable of cutting through steel, yet harbored a spirit fragile enough to shatter under the sheer terror of an empty bed. Dinah Washington. For Dinah Washington, the stage was merely a temporary sanctuary from the relentless demons that haunted her mind. To the public, she was an untouchable powerhouse, a queen radiating absolute confidence under the dazzling stage lights. But within the opulent walls of her Detroit mansion, a silent predator of insecurity was slowly devouring her sanity. Her quest for a glamorous marriage had devolved into a vicious cycle of toxic romance, leaving her with 7 shattered unions and a profoundly unfillable void. Paranoia became her constant companion. She convinced herself that her worth was entirely tied to her physical appearance, terrified that gaining a single pound would cost her both her crown and her current husband. This relentless fear of stigma and fame's crushing pressure morphed into an invisible monster that whispered cruelties to her in the dark. The The sudden drop wasn't a single catastrophic event, but a deliberate, desperate poisoning. To silence the agonizing whispers and artificially sculpt her figure, she juggled lethal doses of diet pills by day and heavy sedatives by night. It was a terrifying cocktail meant to stave off her invisible enemy, but it only accelerated her raw agony. She was wasting away from the inside out, fighting a battle she had already lost in her own head. When her husband found her lifeless body in the early hours of December 14, 1963, the physical cause was listed as a lethal drug combination. But the chilling truth was far more tragic. The Queen's soul had already perished from sheer exhaustion long before her 39-year-old heart finally stopped beating. The very remedy she ingested to preserve her throne became the poison that finalized her exile. And while chemicals silenced the Queen's inner turmoil, an entirely different kind of venom, the cold, calculated greed of absolute betrayal, was preparing to permanently freeze the blood of a blues savior right where he was supposed to be healing. ZZ Hill. In 1982 and 1983, the American South was entirely conquered by one gritty, whiskey-soaked voice. The smash hit Down Home Blues elevated ZZ Hill to the ultimate throne of soul music, cementing his status as an undeniable powerhouse. Basking in a magnificent golden illusion, he set unprecedented chart records, single-handedly reviving a fading genre with his gut-wrenching, authentic outpourings. Yet, the cruel contrast between this spectacular musical zenith and his horrific demise is violently jarring. Healing from a car accident in a stark white hospital room, he was blindsided by a sudden drop far more agonizing than any physical injury. Through cold phone calls and shady financial documents, he unearthed a scandalous betrayal. The trusted associates who swore brotherhood were ruthlessly siphoning off his life's assets. This devastating revelation immediately became a merciless foe. The suffocating resentment triggered a lethal physiological chain reaction within his traumatized system. Consumed by raw agony and sheer panic on his sickbed, his spirit shattered under the crushing weight of utter human callousness. A silent blood clot, heavily fueled by this extreme psychological distress, traveled to his lungs, delivering a definitive death sentence to the 48-year-old legend in the spring of 1984. When the deafening applause fades and the trusted hands you hold are the exact ones gripping the knife, what is the true value of fame's glittering crown? The chilling deception that stopped a heart in a sterile Dallas ward was a brutally tangible, earthly cruelty. Hundreds of miles away, isolated within a luxurious New York high-rise, a far more terrifying phantom menace was already demanding a blood sacrifice from a soul too pure for this world. Donny Hathaway. The horrific plunge from the 15th floor window of New York's Essex House Hotel on a freezing January night in 1979 was the brutal, definitive end to a masterclass in musical purity. At just 33 years old, his shattered body lying on the unforgiving pavement stood in agonizing contrast to the warmth he had just left behind, a piano still vibrating with the lingering touch of a powerhouse. This was his sudden drop, a literal freefall into the dark abyss. Before the concrete claimed him, Donny represented a flawless golden illusion. He weaved breathtaking chords, offering his deeply resonant voice as a healing balm for millions of broken hearts. But behind heavy studio doors, a silent predator was actively hunting him. Diagnosed with severe paranoid schizophrenia, the revered icon fought a terrifying daily battle with an invisible enemy. He hallucinated dark forces conspiring to steal his soul, turning the deafening cheers of his fans into distorted, chilling whispers. The isolation of madness became a merciless foe, inflicting raw agony upon a genius who could seamlessly soothe the world but couldn't save his own mind. When absolute terror eclipsed his will to survive, he chose the window as his only escape. Truly, the most divine symphonies are often just fleeting echoes before the relentless void reclaims its space. As gravity forcefully silenced one tormented genius desperately fleeing his internal demons, a neon-drenched paradise in San Francisco was actively transforming into a cruel graveyard, ready to swallow an unapologetic disco deity facing a highly infectious doom. Sylvester. I can still feel the heavy bass vibrating through the floorboards of the legendary End Up nightclub in San Francisco. Standing shoulder to shoulder in that sea of sweating, euphoric bodies back in the late 1970s, I watched him, Sylvester. He wasn't just a singer, he was an absolute powerhouse and a defiant icon. Under the dazzling stage lights, wearing shimmering sequins that caught every laser beam, his soaring falsetto effortlessly shattered the rigid invisible walls of racial and sexual prejudice. We were happily drowning in a golden illusion of eternal youth and liberation, entirely captivated by the magic of this androgynous demigod. But as the calendar flipped to the 1980s, the joyous music in our sanctuary started skipping. A silent predator, an invisible enemy known as AIDS, began picking our community apart piece by piece. I vividly remember the terrifying chill that completely replaced the disco heat when the hushed rumors started spreading. The sudden drop wasn't merely his agonizing medical diagnosis, it was the breathtakingly cruel abandonment by the very public he had warmed. The systemic blade of societal stigma violently slashed through his glorious aura. People who used to clamor for his autograph now treated him like a walking public disgrace, shrinking away from his gaze in sheer, unadulterated terror. By the final days of 1988, the deafening applause had been entirely replaced by the chilling, clinical silence of a tiny apartment. Bedridden, his once robust and energetic frame was rapidly wasting away into mere skin over bones, enduring the raw agony of an unavoidable death sentence. He was gasping for air, fighting a merciless foe while the media and former colleagues completely looked the other way. When he finally passed away at the age of 41, the brightest, most vibrant strobe light on the world's ultimate dance floor simply flickered, sparked, and went pitch black forever. As the pulsing neon heartbeat of the disco era flatlined in a lonely California bedroom, a fundamentally different brand of darkness was already actively brewing backstage at New York's legendary Apollo Theater, quietly preparing to swallow a glamorous jazz queen whose most lethal wounds were perfectly concealed beneath an expensive layer of flawless stage makeup. Phyllis Hyman. The systemic blade of Hollywood often demands a picture-perfect family image and a flawless exterior, even as the soul is being shredded by an invisible enemy. On the afternoon of June 30, 1995, Phyllis Hyman stood before her mirror, a breathtaking powerhouse with the stature of a supermodel, preparing for her sold-out show at the Apollo Theater. To her fans, she was a goddess of jazz, a golden illusion of strength and elegance. But beneath the shimmering sequins, the raw agony of a decades-long war with bipolar disorder was reaching its final, devastating crescendo. Phyllis lived on a paradox of peaks. One moment she was conquering the Broadway stage or the R&B charts, and the next she was plummeting into a sudden drop of paralyzing depression. She used her voice to heal the world's broken hearts, but she found her own spirit trapped in an unfillable void that no amount of applause could bridge. In the terrifying silence of her New York apartment, the invisible punishment of her mental exhaustion became a merciless foe. Instead of stepping into the forgiving spotlight that evening, she chose to face the darkness alone. She left behind a brief raw agony of a note, "I'm tired. I'm tired." With a handful of sleeping pills, she sought the peace that fame's crushing pressure had stolen from her. At 45, at the absolute zenith of her beauty, the illusion shattered, leaving an empty chair in the pantheon of music and a chilling question about the true cost of our adoration. The silence following the Queen's final sigh was a heavy, suffocating weight. But while Phyllis surrendered to the quiet, a different kind of tragic anthem was being sung on the streets of Philadelphia, a song of a fallen king whose sudden drop would end not in a theater, but on a cold pavement before a locked hospital door. David Ruffin. It begins with a pair of signature, thick-rimmed glasses. In the 1960s, these frames rested upon the face of an absolute powerhouse, a man whose mesmerizing presence birthed a golden illusion for Motown. Behind those lenses, David Ruffin commanded the stage, turning My Girl into an immortal anthem. Yet, on the early morning of June 1, 1991, those iconic glasses were nowhere to be found. Instead, what was hastily dumped from an unmarked car in front of a Philadelphia hospital was merely a John Doe, an emaciated figure exhibiting the raw agony of a fatal crack cocaine overdose. How does an icon descend from reigning in bespoke suits to being discarded like trash? The sudden drop started decades prior. His massive ego alienated his Temptations brothers, triggering a scandalous betrayal in his own mind when he was officially fired. Stripped of his musical family, the invisible walls of isolation closed in. To cope with fame's crushing pressure and the unfillable void of his fading relevance, he sought refuge in narcotics. It wasn't euphoria he chased, it was a desperate anesthetic to silence the invisible punishment of a forgotten king. Drugs became the merciless foe that accelerated his decay, leaving him wasting away into a ghost. The man who once wore the forgiving spotlight like a second skin ended his journey as tabloid fodder. The cold, forensic truth remains. A legendary voice does not immunize a fragile human from expiring alone in the shadows. Such self-inflicted chemical ruin paints a horrifying portrait of a king's demise, Yet an even crueler, biological treason was stealthily metastasizing to choke the most angelic whistle register the world had ever known. Minnie Riperton. In the mid-1970s, the celestial whistle register of Lovin' You pierced the heavens, securing a pristine #1 spot on global charts and establishing its creator as an untouchable powerhouse. She was the ultimate embodiment of a picture-perfect family and radiant femininity, glowing under the dazzling stage lights. To the world, she was living a golden illusion of absolute triumph. Yet, the universe harbors a cruel irony. Sometimes the most divine notes are followed by the most deafening silence. At the exact moment her career reached its absolute zenith, a devastating sudden drop was delivered in a sterile doctor's office. At merely 29 years old, she was handed a horrific death sentence: breast cancer. This invisible enemy violently invaded her body, plunging her into raw agony. She bravely transformed into a public spokesperson, fiercely fighting this merciless foe while continuing her tours. But behind the courageous smile, she was rapidly wasting away. The relentless chemotherapy and a traumatic mastectomy were her invisible punishment. As malignant cells metastasized, completely paralyzing her right arm, the illusion shattered. In her final days at a Los Angeles hospital in 1979, the superstar was reduced to a frail mother gasping for air, weakly singing to her children to warm the room. Passing away at just 31 in her husband's arms, what is the true value of conquering the vocal stratosphere when a biological terror violently yanks you into a premature grave? A microscopic disease extinguished that ethereal soprano from the inside out. Far removed from sterile medical centers, however, a brutal concrete labyrinth was deploying an equally lethal suppression, systematically suffocating a brilliant pioneer until his legendary voice was nothing but a hollow echo. Little Willie John. Look closely at the faded, coarse fabric of an inmate's uniform from the Washington State Penitentiary in the spring of 1968. Stamped across the chest is a gaunt identification number, a cold sequence of digits that violently replaced the name of an absolute powerhouse. Before these frigid iron bars became his reality, this pint-sized titan was an icon who set the dazzling stage lights ablaze, his raw, yearning voice inspiring future legends like James Brown. He built a golden illusion of R&B dominance. Yet, a fatal altercation triggered a horrifying sudden drop. Stripped of his glory, he was thrown into a dark cell, instantly transformed into isolated tabloid fodder. Behind those walls, a silent predator, severe pneumonia, invaded his chest. The systemic blade of prison apathy and the total lack of basic medical care became his merciless foe. Left completely alone, the 30-year-old genius was wasting away, reduced to skin over bones and constantly gasping for air. The invisible punishment of being caged like a withered nightingale was his ultimate raw agony. He didn't just die from a sudden heart attack on that May night. He died from sheer, terrifying neglect. The chilling forensic truth remains. Society will happily consume an artist's soul for entertainment, only to discard their broken body in the freezing dark when they stumble. The frigid concrete and governmental apathy violently extinguished this caged nightingale. Yet, iron bars aren't the only cages in the music industry. Sometimes a celebrated prodigy builds her own inescapable prison, voluntarily trading her magnificent youth for a slow-acting, chemical venom. Esther Phillips. In a California hospital room reeking of antiseptic in 1984, the monitors flatlined, marking the grim finale of an agonizing battle. At just 48, severe liver and kidney failure claimed the shattered remains of a former powerhouse. She died not merely from organ failure, but from the raw agony of a soul completely depleted by decades of horrific self-torture. Decades before becoming an emaciated shell wasting away, Esther was the versatile queen of R&B and jazz. She projected a golden illusion of invincibility, earning Grammy nominations and captivating the world with her deeply soulful voice. Yet the sudden drop began terrifyingly early. Swept into the grueling industry as a mere teenager, she sought a desperate escape from fame's crushing pressure by unknowingly signing a deadly pact with toxic substances. The forgiving spotlight temporarily masked her descent, but the silent predator of heavy addiction was mercilessly gnawing at every cell. Her own body became an invisible enemy, executing a slow, irreversible death sentence. The woman who spent her entire life singing about humanity's pain ultimately ended her journey as isolated tabloid fodder, engulfed by the terrifying silence of absolute loneliness. Fame is a glittering thief that gladly accepts your youth as currency, only to abandon you in the freezing dark when the final bill comes due. As one queen's self-inflicted chemical ruin slowly silenced her magnificent blues, An entirely different, explosive form of devastation was already brewing inside a Los Angeles home, where a universally beloved Prince of Peace would soon face the ultimate familial betrayal at the barrel of a gun. Marvin Gaye. On the fateful morning of April 1, 1984, a dry gunshot violently shattered the gloom of a Los Angeles home, instantly executing the century's most brilliant artist. The man bleeding out was the immortal Prince of Soul, an icon who revolutionized music to advocate for global peace. Yet, the smoking barrel above him belonged to his own father. How did this powerhouse plummet from the dazzling stage lights to this execution? His final years were a grueling chain of bankruptcies, a shattered marriage, and brutal corrosion by an invisible enemy of severe depression. Driven into an unfillable void by fame's crushing pressure, his golden illusion entirely collapsed. Relocating to his parents' home, the invisible walls of confinement mutated into a living hell. The sudden drop was an impulsive argument, the explosive breaking point of a traumatized soul that delivered a literal death sentence at just 44. Is a genius truly capable of saving the world if he cannot survive the brutal fractures of his own bloodline? The deafening echo of a father's bullet finalized one domestic tragedy. Out on a pitch-black Philadelphia road, the horrific crunch of tearing metal was already waiting to execute a much slower life sentence upon an undisputed R&B god. Teddy Pendergrass. The twisted steering wheel of a car on a dark Philadelphia road in 1982 stood as the cold, metal witness to the ultimate sudden drop. Just seconds prior, it was gripped by an undeniable powerhouse, a reigning sex symbol who commanded the dazzling stage lights and made history as the first black artist to record 5 consecutive platinum albums. But in one horrific crunch of tearing metal, the golden illusion violently shattered. The steering wheel watched its master's body go terrifyingly limp, locking him into a tragic invisible punishment. Waking up paralyzed from the chest down, Teddy was instantly stripped of his physical kingdom. The hands that once embraced immense glory could no longer even lift a glass of water. Confined to the stark walls of a hospital room, his reality became an unfillable void. Severe depression became a silent predator, feeding on the raw agony of an icon mourning his own living body. He bravely battled this merciless foe and the devastating complications of his paralysis for nearly 3 decades, before a definitive death sentence of colon cancer claimed his exhausted frame in 2010. The silent metal remains a chilling reminder of how fate can permanently paralyze a majestic lion in a mere fraction of a second. While one giant was violently confined to a physical wheelchair against his will, another self-proclaimed king voluntarily locked himself inside a dizzying, gold-plated labyrinth, actively chaining his soul to an endless cycle of chemical destruction. Rick James. Thousands of dollars blown weekly. Millions of records sold. These were the staggering statistics behind the king of punk funk, a powerhouse who constructed a golden illusion of an endless party inside his lavish mansion. Yet, calculating the metrics of his sudden drop reveals a terrifying death sentence. Behind the luxurious fur coats, he consumed massive quantities of narcotics not to celebrate, but to numb the raw agony of extreme loneliness. Fighting an invisible enemy, he desperately sought to fill an unfillable void within his spirit. The mathematics of his decay were merciless. Every hit subtracted precious time from his life, accelerating a slow, self-inflicted execution. His extreme dependence ruthlessly ravaged his body, adding severe complications of diabetes and heart failure to his grim biological ledger. In 2004, the final tally was coldly calculated inside his Los Angeles home. At 56, the spotlight had faded, leaving behind one dead icon and a completely exhausted heart. When you subtract millions spent on artificial highs from a desperately lonely soul, the final equation equals a withered man expiring amidst the deafening, bitter echoes of his past. This exact mathematics of self-destruction yields the same tragic zero, a devastating formula that would eventually claim another pioneering architect of rock and roll, whose masterful hands traded global dominance for a lonely demise amidst shattered ruins. Ike Turner. In a quiet, empty room in San Marcos on a late 2007 day, a 76-year-old man lay entirely motionless, his body decimated by emphysema and cocaine abuse. The deafening roar of fans had long been replaced by a hauntingly eerie silence. This was the devastating sudden drop of Ike Turner, the pioneering architect of rock and roll. Armed with magical hands and brilliant musical foresight, he was an undeniable powerhouse. He built a golden illusion of global dominance. But when the dazzling stage lights dimmed, he surrendered to a silent predator. He traded his God-given talent for reckless indulgence, letting an invisible enemy turn his empire to ash. The heavy weight of public ostracism became his ultimate invisible punishment, subjecting him to raw agony. He died an isolated king trapped in his own ruins, his magnificent song ending on a painfully dissonant note. How tragic that the hands capable of redefining modern music could never pull their owner from the abyss of self-destruction. While one architect's empire crumbled into toxic dust, another foundational musical pillar was actively bleeding out his genius, tethered to a cold medical machine instead of a piano. Billy Preston. Trace the clear plastic 4-tube winding down from a humming dialysis machine in a sterile Arizona hospital. This synthetic lifeline is the only thing keeping a former powerhouse tethered to reality. That bruised arm belongs to Billy Preston, the keyboard genius universally dubbed the Fifth Beatle. He was the ultimate musical glue, holding global icons together while masking his own fractures under a golden illusion of an ever-present radiant smile. Follow that tube backward, and you uncover a horrifying sudden drop. To silence his internal demons, he willingly burned his massive fortune, sacrificing thousands of dollars daily to an invisible enemy of heavy addiction. The raw agony of chronic kidney failure and pericarditis became his invisible punishment. Wasting away in terrifying isolation, he was forced to endure the soulless rhythm of a blood-filtering machine instead of deafening applause. He passed away at 59. The cold, forensic truth is absolute. You can possess the magic to beautify the world's music, but no amount of royalty checks can buy back a soul permanently pawned to self-destruction. While decades of excess slowly drained the life from a seasoned veteran, the ruthless industry machinery had long perfected the dark art of violently consuming its victims before they were even old enough to legally drive. Frankie Lymon. The Hollywood machine is a ravenous beast, and its favorite delicacies are the souls of unguarded children. Long before he was a man, Frankie Lymon was fed into this ruthless grinder. At just 13, his angelic voice behind the mega-hit, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, generated a massive golden illusion of wealth for the industry giants. To the label, he wasn't a child. He was a highly profitable powerhouse to be exploited. But as puberty naturally changed his vocal cords, the industry delivered a violently cruel sudden drop. The executives who once praised him instantly turned their backs, leaving a teenager to navigate the invisible walls of unfair contracts and a scandalous betrayal entirely alone. Crushed by fame's crushing pressure and the sheer terror of losing his identity, Frankie sought refuge in heroin. This silent predator wasn't a choice, it was his desperate shield against a system that had already discarded him. He was rapidly wasting away, isolated as mere tabloid fodder. On a cold Harlem floor in 1968, the machine's ultimate invisible punishment was realized. The 25-year-old expired from a massive overdose. His death is a furious, tragic indictment. The entertainment industry will gladly crown a child king just to bleed him dry, leaving him to die in absolute darkness. Yet, while an exploited youth surrendered to the crushing weight of the shadows, a mature, towering monarch of the stage was actively dancing his way toward a horrifying, public execution under the brightest lights imaginable. Jackie Wilson. For 9 agonizing years, he lay completely immobilized in a vegetative state, enduring the raw agony of absolute silence. This grueling execution was the tragic epilogue for a kinetic icon. Before his catastrophic sudden drop, Jackie Wilson was an absolute powerhouse famously dubbed Mr. Excitement. Under the dazzling stage lights, he crafted a golden illusion of boundless vitality. Yet, fame's crushing pressure forced him to artificially maintain this impossible rhythm with alcohol and sedatives. When he collapsed mid-performance in 1975, the illusion shattered. He was left wasting away, completely isolated until his death in 1984. A magnificent halo is ultimately just a radiant thief, demanding an artist's very life for fleeting public adoration. While one titan was frozen into perpetual stillness, the cruel hands of destitution were actively stealing the foundational voice from a kingdom's first reigning lady. Mary Wells. The torn, fading poster hanging on the wall of a cramped apartment in the early 1990s vividly remembered a queen. It proudly depicted the First Lady of Motown, an undisputed powerhouse whose sweet voice conquered the globe with the classic My Guy, projecting a golden illusion of eternal royalty. But the glossy paper could only watch in mute horror as its real-life counterpart suffered a devastating sudden drop. Ruthless contract disputes had erased her entire fortune, leaving her to face the invisible punishment of poverty. Worse, the silent predator of laryngeal cancer, fueled by years of chain smoking to cope with fame's crushing pressure, ruthlessly stole her defining instrument. Reduced to skin over bones and entirely silenced, she endured the raw agony of extreme destitution. Relying on charity from fellow artists, she fought her invisible enemy until her tragic death at 49 in 1992. The faded poster remains a chilling testament. The industry will immortalize your glamorous image on paper, but gladly leave your human flesh wasting away in forgotten poverty.